A very good morning to you. Welcome back to Jersey Tech Week. My name is Gary Burgess. It's a delight to have your company here. If you were with us yesterday, two absolutely incredible sessions. We linked up around the world with some amazing speakers. If you missed it, I do highly recommend you at some point taking the time to catch up on those. But here we are. I think it's Tuesday. I've lost track with so many sessions. And this morning we are devoting to one key theme, and that is Jersey's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's take a look at what's on the menu for us today, and I think you're going to enjoy all of this. We'll be speaking very shortly to representatives of government and private industry to learn how they work together to keep the island safe. A little bit later on this morning, we'll also be talking about education and skills. We've heard a lot about how students at home and teachers trying to get that education to their pupils was a challenge that they managed to overcome. We will find out how. We're also talking about the role of the telecoms companies in the islands. We are privileged to have world-leading infrastructure, and that is something we'll be exploring in more detail before hearing more from private industry as well. So all of that to come as the morning continues. I hope you will enjoy this as much as I do. Let's though start off with a look at how Jersey has managed over these incredible past few months through the eyes of Digital Jersey's Tony Moretta.
Well, obviously no one is happy to be in the current situation. But I think one of the great things about Jersey and our digital infrastructure and our digital skills is people have been able to work from home relatively seamlessly. Schools have been able to keep in touch with students in terms of keeping teaching going. People have been able to communicate with loved ones, and they've been able to be entertained. And that's really down to the fact that we have an amazing infrastructure with our 100% fibre network built by JT, operated by some amazing telecoms companies who've really supported the whole island adopt to remote working and remote living.
Tell you what, we should never take 2020 for granted. Every man, woman and child in this island playing their part, and regardless of your role in that, it's fascinating to see that technology was absolutely fundamental. It also threw up a challenge for government. Government used to doing what it does, always planning for the worst while hoping for the best. But this year was something that needed a response on an entirely different scale. And that's where the government of Jersey worked with Prosperity 24/7 to do something very special to keep us all safe.
When COVID struck, we didn't know the effect it would have on our loved ones, our lives, our work, our leisure, our freedom.
But at government, we knew we had to act at speed and implement a system that would work. It had to work.
Side by side with Prosperity 24/7, we worked around the clock, 24/7, to implement the right tools for the job. Technology that was capable, flexible, scalable, with the purpose of putting people at the heart of everything we did. Success for us was if we could sleep at night, knowing we'd done our best. For each and every islander, it had to be personal. Track and trace is about real people, real lives, visualising people's interactions to break the chain of infection, and using data to track the impact of the virus from every different perspective.
So that as it changed, we could react and always stay one step ahead.
As an island community, we can innovate and make decisions fast, protecting the health of our people, protecting our economy, protecting our island to the very best of our ability.
From the very first case we contact traced, we never stopped. We started furiously and built, adapted and evolved, always learning. We don't expect our community to know the intricate details of what goes on behind the scenes, the power of the tools in place, the insights we have, the real-time visuals of interactions and connections, from the minutest detail to sector-specific overview. Robust technology that's built to learn. Our systems mean we can keep our community safe. The readiness is there. We're not first responders. We don't wear a uniform. But that doesn't mean that the actions we took didn't save people's lives.
We haven't beaten COVID yet, but thanks to the people that went above and beyond, the infrastructure is in place to keep islanders safe. And we're ready for whatever comes next. Technology created an opportunity, but the purpose behind it came from people. Together, we've got this far. Let's keep it like this.
I tell you what, every time I see these films, I learn so much, and that insight into the role of private industry and government working together, and a real sense, as much as this might be about technology, it might be about all things digital, it might be about ones and zeros on a spreadsheet, it's ultimately all about people and keeping us safe. Let's learn a bit more about this with my panel. We've just seen them on the film there. Alison and Chris, good morning to you both. Let's get the formal introductions, please. Alison, first of all, yourself.
Morning, Gary. Yes, I'm Head of Environmental and Consumer Protection for Government of Jersey.
Now, that sounds an incredible job. What actually is that job?
Well, it's in charge of the Environmental Health Department, trading standards, but also under this COVID response, pretty much heading up and setting up contact tracing.
I wanted to ask that because your job title does not quite give all that away. You need a bigger business card at the end of this. And Chris, what about yourself?
So my name's Chris Clark and I am the Chief Exec of Prosperity 24/7.
And what is Prosperity 24/7?
That's a good question. We are a technology business, locally based, but globally known. So we work everywhere and anywhere for a whole range of organisations, but specifically in this programme of work, the Government of Jersey and Alison de Bourcier.
Glad to hear it. Right, Alison, I want to rewind to perhaps February, March this year. What was your job at that point, and what was your idea of a big project, a big deal in your world at that time?
I mean, when we started, we've always been responsible for contact tracing infectious diseases within environmental health, but clearly on a lot smaller scale. We had been planning for the pandemic. So once the first case came through, we started contact tracing. And I think it's really important to emphasise that we did it right from the start, and we have never stopped. But it was really important that we pulled all of the information together so that we could manage each individual, but also get that big picture of how the infection, how it was panning out within the island, so we could make really good informed decisions within policy.
And what's that like in the moment at the start? I think you could probably see the road ahead. We'd seen the images coming out of Wuhan and wider China. We'd at that point seen the hospitals in particularly northern Italy, I remember rather vividly. We did not have that at that point in the island, and suddenly there you are on this theoretical front line that became a real front line at some point, knowing there's some big stuff coming.
Yeah. But we learned really quickly, because as soon as we got the first cases in, you learn at such a terrific rate. So we were putting the pieces of the jigsaw together very quickly, but we were also future scanning the horizon, thinking, what can we do to do the very best response for Jersey? So we need to have something that is so incredibly agile and fast moving that we can easily implement the next step and the next step. And we're still doing that now. We've not stopped.
That's the bit I find fascinating. It is a never-ending story, and there isn't really a brochure to get off the shelf and refer to, because we are all learning and sharing that knowledge as we go. What was the point at which you thought, well, hang on a minute, I know how to contact trace, whether it's salmonella or Legionnaire's disease or whatever else is going on, but we know this is going to be of a different scale. At what point did you think we don't just need more bums on seats, to put it bluntly, but perhaps an even more effective technology solution?
I mean, we looked at the technology that we had in-house, other tools that were available. When we got to about case 16, I think it was in the island, you know, we had to make a quick, fast decision that we needed the technology to pull everything together. We needed that single source of truth, and only excellent technology is going to do that for us. Government were able to make very quick decisions. They were the right decisions. We are really proud of what we've produced with our partners, and it's future-proof, because we've demonstrated time and time again that what we're building, what we continue to create and enhance, is ready for the next step and the next step. We've got that big global picture.
I'd love to hear that, Chris. I've been intentionally leaving you out so far because I'm really wanting to not because I don't like you. I'm really wanting to set the scene here. That I mean, we all know this is so different, but this is in the context of a government that is not used to day-to-day rapid response and also rapid deployment of technology. And suddenly, I don't know whether it's the phone rings or an email arrives. Tell me about that moment.
So, first of all, I had a missed call from Alison, which was rather embarrassing. And then that was on March the 20th. And I phoned Alison back at 2 o'clock. By 2:30, we'd agreed to meet at 3. We'd actually already closed our office down by this stage because we were slightly ahead of the curve with regard to our own business continuity at Prosperity. So we all, myself and 2 colleagues came in to meet with Alison. By 5 o'clock on the afternoon of the 20th, which was a Friday, we had already put an outline sketch of what was required to enhance the systems that Alison had to really take them to the next level to enable the scale. And as I said, I think it was on the 20th, we had 11 cases, and we were live on the 25th, where we only had 18 cases. But by then, by the 25th, for the first iteration of the system, we had contact tracing by people to people, not just name to name, so really high fidelity records. But we also had everyone taught and educated, even though they were already in invocation and remote working around the island. So by lunchtime, 12 o'clock on the Wednesday, after the initiation on the Friday, we were live. And it was absolutely amazing. With government support, modernisation and digital, doing all their sort of change advisory board processes, things that wouldn't ordinarily be executed at such speed. Everything was just an amazing. So it was that whole Team Jersey spirit, and it was just phenomenal. And then, as Alison said, and as I said in the video, things have iterated ever since and just gone forward and moved forward as the understanding has changed and as the innovation has been required to really deliver the insights to make decisions.
You are a coiled spring of enthusiasm about this. I love that you can remember not just the day or the case numbers, but literally the hour of the day. You've really lived this. Yeah. Just paint a picture for me. You say, yeah, we built this, we iterated it, did this, this, and this. Blank sheet of paper. What did you build? So we started off actually with the first thing we did, and my wife probably won't appreciate me saying this, but she's a bit of a germaphobe. So we had been tracking COVID-19 from January onwards in our own household and seeing what was going on and what was evolving and where to watch, what to watch, etc. So I was quite ahead of the curve, I suppose, with my own understanding regarding responses and what could be done. So I was looking at what was going on in South Korea before we even asked for help, but also in other locations. So we based it on the outcomes. We said, what do we need? We need to be able to support the team to make decisions. And whether that's Alison's team or SP3, so strategy, policy and planning, as well, to really be able to respond to the threat to the island. So everything was designed and defined from the WHO reporting requirements. So it's always about the output, not about how do you administer the system necessarily, but how do you make it as simple as possible to administer, but make sure you've always got that insight and intelligence to make the decisions. So it started off with the reporting requirements for WHO and Public Health England. And then from there, it's about strategy and policy. And constantly, Alison was working with colleagues around government about what did they need to be able to fulfil their requirements and to, as you said in the video, keep the island safe. It's been amazing. A massive focus about people, because that's one thing that's really critical to this whole response is personal, Gary. And I think it was about bringing it right down to how we individually case manage every single individual, whether you've got a positive result and, you know, the shock and trauma of that, and how we give appropriate welfare and support for that individual, but also any direct contacts, their families, so that they have, you know, the most support and guidance that they can possibly have to try and remove the barriers for stopping them from, you know, staying in isolation. And this effectively, because of the nature of what it is a secret story. It's a hidden army, because you are not there shouting in front of the media microphones to journalists like me about, oh, I've just spoken to Bob and Mary down the street and they're coronavirus positive, yada, 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 and they're feeling traumatic. You just don't do that. No. How hard or how easy is it for you to keep your focus when, and I include myself in this, journalists are there at those press conferences having a go at politicians sometimes for the communication, but you know behind the scenes you've just got to fight the good fight. Yeah, well, confidentiality is really important, and I think that we need to, you know, for many reasons, including legal reasons, but also we have to gain the trust of every individual that we engage with. And they have to be incredibly open to us about all of their interactions. And sure, there's lots of very difficult stories behind that.
but to engage and build the rapport and the trust for that, it has to be confidential. So we have to keep that line.
And tell me a bit about you inside government. Just try and be honest. OK, I'll word it like this. How would your friends describe you? Are you the sort of person, when it needs to, you can get out your elbows and cut through the crap? Because bureaucracy inside government is notoriously slow. There seems to be a 3-year working party to make a decision. And you did not have that option. You had to redefine what decision making looked like.
Yeah, but I think in this particular case, you know, everybody understood, everybody could see what was going on in the world. It was clearly a public health emergency. So why would you want to put barriers in the way? For what purpose? For what gain? So provided we followed all the legal gateways to obtain the information. And I think one of the beautiful things about, you know, what we've designed is that we've been able to utilise everything that's local, everything that's good. You know, there's information that we hold within government that's been critical to identify people and get into contact with residents. So why would we not give it everything that we've got from a local perspective? Because that's going to really help with, you know, better outcomes for islanders.
Yeah, and if I may just jump in there, the amazing thing was when you talk about that permission and that permissive environment and that permissive culture, by 5 o'clock on that Friday afternoon, we had, admittedly, I rung around to everyone I knew to get the permission, but we literally by 5 o'clock we had all the permissions in place from 6 different chief execs or director generals of departments. It was amazing, and to have that, it was like, right, we've got all the green lights, we've got all the permissions, we've got the resources lined up, we've got the access to data, we've got the permission to use the data that we need, and let's get on with it.
That One Gov approach. It's about working collectively as government for the island. It's not about silo mentality and working within your remit, because actually for COVID, it's a big jigsaw puzzle, and we have to put the pieces together. We have to work seamlessly, as we did. You know,
it's a true exemplar of the government working correctly.
And actually, you took the exact word out of my mind. Out of my mouth, I was going to say exemplar. This, it strikes me, is the next time we need the example to take off the shelf to show what can be done when the need and the will is there. We can do this. Chris, just going back inside your own business, this is a point at which businesses were told, work from home where you can. We didn't know a lot of what we now know about the virus, so it was keeping apart, and it was all those hands, face, space equivalents. I know that the messaging varies jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it's all around that. You're still trying to run a business, suddenly taking on, is it fair to say, the most important project of your life? Yeah,
well, Alison and I have had this conversation before about the fact that it feels like everything we've done in our careers to date was building to this point. And whether it's setting up prosperity and building prosperity and growing the team, the capability, when the call came, and you've never had a more important call to save people's lives, we were able to stand up the team. The fact that we'd already invoked and we'd already been working remotely meant that throughout the entire, well, from March to July, I think admittedly I only had 4 days off work, but we were able to stand up and work consistently and constantly any hour that was required to get this done, all working remotely, all adhering to social distancing and everything else and some. And it was just an amazing sort of team spirit but that team spirit extended to government as well. Alison, Kelly, I know Kelly's out the back, but it was just an amazing effort. And people will never appreciate how much effort there was to get this through. When you've got different decisions being made in the government to do different activities, is all I'll say, with no notice often. And that's working 48 hours with no sleep, literally to get things done. But that's the thing, the proximity and having a local supplier.
The tools we've got are incredible. I mean, if people could see the fact that we can see each and every person's interaction in what setting, and then we can zoom out and look at, let's see everything across schools, let's just look at restaurants, let's just look at healthcare, so we can see and look over timeframes. That visibility, and actually in the diagram form, it tells us so much.
Yeah, and dynamic, constantly live. And as you say, the anonymity of it all is people just aren't aware, and nor should they need to be really, but this is a fantastic opportunity for us to talk about it.
Before we wrap up, what is the big takeaway you've taken out of this that you will be able to deploy to future projects? Chris, I'll start with you. Something you've really learned in the heart of a crisis that will help your business, that may help others watching.
I would say that my team is a legend, but also I would say that I was always confident in the team's capability, but also the government's capability, and I'm incredibly proud of what the government have been able to do in a time of incredible pressure and scrutiny as well. So I think that rather than it being about us, I think government should really take heart about what they can achieve.
And Alison, what about you? You take away in 10 or 20 years from now, you're on the lecture circuit, reflecting back on these distant memories of 2020. What do you tell them as the key learning?
That government can move at a huge pace and has an incredible amount of agility and is incredibly dynamic. When we need to do it, we can absolutely do it, and maybe we need to do it more often.
I like that. That feels like fridge magnet wisdom that we all should have in our lives. Alison and Chris, thank you so much. It's been a revelation and truly fascinating. I found it really heartening to hear as well. So there we are, the first of our panels of the morning, as we look at how Jersey has responded to all the issues of COVID-19, and much more to come.
We've got infrastructure that they can't believe we have, that they don't have in the UK. We've got everything anyone would need in a small contained location, and amazing people connectivity as well as digital connectivity.
It's where smart cities meet smart islands, meet smart everything, because really it's starting to work, turning data into information which gives you some insight, which allows you then to have impacts on the island or a city level. That's where it starts becoming incredibly important.
I think one of the great things about Jersey and our digital infrastructure and our digital skills is people have been able to work from home relatively seamlessly. People have been able to communicate with loved ones, and they've been able to be entertained. And that's really down to the fact that we have an amazing infrastructure with our 100% fibre network built by JT, operated by some amazing telecoms companies who've really supported the whole island adopt to remote working and remote living.
Every time I see this, and I'm reminded of what we have in this island, it is pretty astounding. If you are watching here in Jersey, I hope you are learning a lot about what exists already. If you're watching somewhere else in the world, take more notice of Jersey. Look at what we're doing, and we will welcome you as soon as you want to be here. We've spoken about government and private industry working together. Now let's talk about one of the big themes of the past few months, and that is how those working in education have effectively rewritten the textbook on how they do what they do, whether that's education in schools or working on skills with individuals and with industry as well. Of course, Jersey having a big push on upskilling and reskilling and growing our workforce and future workforce when it comes to digital skills. I have here a stellar panel. Give me your best stellar faces. That is what we've got here. The four of you will work left to right just to introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Hi, I'm Pete Jones. I'm Assistant Head for Teaching and Learning at Quennevais School.
Rory Steele, Head of Academy, Digital Jersey.
Mark Rogers, I work for the government and I'm the Director General for Children, Young People, Education and Skills.
Leonie McCrann, I'm the CEO of Marbral Advisory.
It's been a crazy time for you guys. I don't know how you are summoning a smile this morning, but you are, and it's a testament to your resilience. I think, Mark, I want to start with you overseeing all of this from a governmental perspective before we get to individual schools and industry and the Digital Jersey Academy as well. You are suddenly in charge of an awful lot of people whose entire approach to their career, their vocation, has changed overnight.
So it's both changed overnight, but it hasn't, because the basis of the business that I'm in is people. So we've had to use different means of communication and getting the work done, but the bottom line is maintaining those relationships. So whether it's been an absence of face-to-face and replaced by phone, Teams, Zoom, whatever, nonetheless, the basis of our work continues to be building relationships, building trust and getting work done. So whilst there have been tremendous changes in the last, 8 months or so, one thing that has not changed is our emphasis on making sure that we work closely, we keep those relationships warm, we develop the trust to make sure that you can do different things at speed.
And how do you do that? It's wonderful to hear, and I'm reassured to hear it, and I'm not surprised to hear it, but you almost make it sound like a walk in the park. I know you've worked your backsides off in recent months.
So I think everybody has worked their backsides off, and that really helps, because what you see around you is a set of colleagues making exactly the same effort. as you're trying to make a difference, to do things for the community that's going to make that kind of positive change for them in very difficult circumstances. No, it's not a walk in the park, but it's tremendously motivating actually to be thrown new challenges on a daily basis, to see people not just step up to the plate, but beyond the plate actually, and to see talents come through that you thought were there but hadn't seen, or you hadn't seen enough of. So actually it's been really energizing, despite obviously being long hours and getting tired. You get back up and do it again because you know that there's a bunch of people out there rooting for the island.
Which is lovely to hear, Peter. Let's go right to the front line.
Yeah.
Suddenly we go from overseeing things in government to you are there, part of the leadership team of a school. Suddenly you have to change everything. What do you do?
Yeah, it was interesting because obviously the virus was spreading quite quickly in the UK, and we were thinking, oh, it's not going to come to Jersey. We'll be fine. And within literally a matter of weeks, you know, our world had turned upside down a little bit in terms of how we were going to think about teaching and learning at our school. We have a really wide range of abilities in terms of tech with staff. And we have a very wide base of our students in terms of their use of technology, especially at home. You know, some students have their own device, some students didn't have any devices at all, some students didn't have Wi-Fi. So there was a huge, force of people on the ground helping, making sure that everybody in our school, all 750 of them, had access to the excellent lessons that we had provided.
Before we get onto the pupils who are fundamentally at the heart of this, it's interesting, isn't it, from a teacher's perspective? Not every teacher will be au fait with Zoom, Skype, Teams, yada, yada, yada.
No, not at all. And I have to say also, you know, our staff had a set of iPads in school. We have school computers in school, and, you know, so we're used to that. Other teachers at home didn't have their own, you know, up-to-date devices. So it was making sure that everyone could work in a method that would work for our students, but would work for our teachers as well. We skilled them up very, very quickly because we knew this was likely to happen. We had online training throughout the time that we were off. So every week I'd lead a briefing, talking about, right, how could we do these things better? How can we motivate our students better? So it was a continual learning process. And that first term, I have to say, I was getting up and I was looking at my phone. There was usually about 10, 12 emails from staff saying, Pete, this isn't working. Can you help me with this? And it was going on till 12 at night every day. And that was through, you know, working with our students in school, our vulnerable students, and working outside of school. It was a mammoth effort by all our staff, but particularly those staff that weren't used to working that way at all. You know, I've always dabbled with technology, but we have some staff that I wouldn't say chalk and talkers, but they're more traditional sort of teachers, and for them to get on board and start to work in different ways was such a joy to see, and actually they saw real benefits from it as well. Well,
let's talk to somebody who it feels like was born into a digital cocoon the way his career has developed. Rory Steele, from working in a school to working at the Digital Jersey Academy, and indeed still supporting everyone anywhere. You are a community evangelist for this stuff. Does this feel, I'm going to use a word that some people may not like, do you feel vindicated? Everything you've been talking about for years, suddenly we need it in 2020.
Well, yeah, well, certainly with two hats on. You know, we had staff that had been quite vocal maybe 5 years ago about how technology was going to influence education, emailing me saying, yeah, sorry. And it was, but it was great to get those emails, you know, because people saw what the light was and where the future is going. That's all the pandemic has done. If anything, I think it's just highlighted a digital divide, not necessarily just in education. I mean, we're talking about that here, and you know, parents at home had different experiences wherever they were, and you can focus on that being one problem or another, but it just focused the digital divide in communities around the world, not necessarily just in education, just in business. We had just as many businesses struggling as we did schools. So it wasn't at any point you could say that was the problem. We actually need to embrace digital technology and skills as a community and not focus on one area.
Now, when we talk about technology, we can get very caught up in software and hardware. When it comes to the soft skills around the use of this technology, is you're helping people out either directly in the academy, or you're getting a phone call from government or from a school, from a former colleague, giving a variation of, Rory, I need your help. What have you learned about people in this situation?
I've learned that I hate the term digital native. That is absolutely for sure. Everyone talks about students and young people growing up with technology and being able to use it. It's actually the opposite. Technology has become so easy to use that I think fundamentally those skills of how it works have been lost. When I used to connect a wireless headphone to my computer, that was like half a day out for me. And now you just get your AirPods and your phone goes, do you want to connect? You go, yeah, great, thanks. And that's the kind of skill set we've lost, that problem solving. And that came around with government focused on theoretical exams without any practical application. And I think actually in the UK, we're now seeing that change to vocation and to practical application. So for me, you got to look at the silver lining of things. And I think this has just highlighted that those theoretical skills, while not useless, were not the be-all and end-all of education.
Leonie, let's bring you in on this. Where does Marbral Advisory plumb into this process? Because it feels to me not just in education, but in the wider community and the workforce, that need to change, but change well. How have you helped, and what have you done in recent months?
Yes, so we've had an interesting experience because some of our clients decided to speed up change, take advantage of change happening around them and make things happen quicker, whilst others sort of ground to a halt. And what we realised is that it's that change mindset that's key, that's critical and important. And what our clients were asking us for, similar to what Rory said, is problem-solving skills, people who could multitask, people who were resilient. You needed more than just the sort of ability to deliver something. You needed to be able to manage people through that change. And as change specialists, of course, we knew we were going through the change curve, but we knew we had to get through it really quickly, through to acceptance, to be able to help our clients through it as well. So I think it's really about people stopping now and taking stock of the fact that not only do you need digital skills, but you need problem solving. You need people who can multitask, people who are resilient and can manage under pressure.
And can people manage under pressure? Can you teach resilience and problem solving, or does there need to be an inherent skill, instinct for being that sort of person? Is that something the least problem solving person can learn to do?
I think absolutely everybody can learn. I think some people it's inherent. It's in the way they operate, and you know, and those people do very, very well in these sorts of scenarios. But it can be taught. But I also think it's important to teach it to the management, because management are the ones who need to take people through these types of change. And this is just another change, okay, quite a significant one, quite a drastic one. But it is a change nonetheless. So I think it's really important that people take some lessons out of this. Like when they're future planning, when they're thinking about disaster recovery, it's not just a Dior site and a list of contact details, it's who is going to be in that disaster recovery team. How do we mobilise people to look after each other? How do we mobilise people to make that change, to get through that curve quickly?
I think that's the bit that fascinates me. When we take the sting and the heat and the seriousness of the pandemic out of this, actually the issues are universal and repeatable time and time again. Mark, I'm going to get really personal with you now. Here we are, eye to eye, eyeball to eyeball. What have you learned about yourself in all of this? Because, you know, you got this gig. You did not expect to be leading your entire government department through this pandemic this year. You just didn't. So what have you learned about yourself?
I've probably relearned some lessons of old that you forget because you don't have such a sustained period of pressure in the past. So I think the first thing I'm going to say sounds slightly curious, but I did think about this. So under plan and over resource is one of the things I've learnt. So we're in a fast moving environment where I can't remember who came up with the cliche about, you know, a plan is only as good as the first contact with the enemy. But it's true. So plan well enough, but don't over plan, and absolutely make sure you've thought through for tomorrow, next week, and if you can, the month ahead, what you need to put around that plan to deliver it. So I've been reminded very keenly of that. And I think picking up on your question and point about resilience, again, the other thing I've been reminded is one of those areas that we keep forgetting to do enough about, and that's about people's well-being. So whether or not you're innately resilient, you can help people by recognising the signs of pressure let alone stress. And you can put in place a set of things that help people decompress from time to time, even if they are almost working 24/7. So I think a combination of put enough people on the job, which we always forget to do because we go into hero mode if we're not careful, don't we, and lead the charge, and look after yourself are really, really important lessons. I guess the final one for those of us who've been in the midst of kind of the structures of all of this is you need to plan recovery at the same time you plan response. I had over many years, I've been in situations where there's been an emergency and you know in your head, let's think about a month ahead, let's think about 3 months ahead, what does recovery look like? But you get consumed by the response. Obviously you do, because people want you and need you to do something now, but plan for recovery as soon as you possibly can is the other thing that I've been reminded of.
Let's just broaden out some of that well-being, wellness and mental health. Of course, you want a well workforce, but suddenly your customers, the pupils effectively at school, suddenly their mental health and well-being is as important, if not more important, than their maths or English lessons.
Yes is the answer to that question, I think.
What do you do?
First of all, a number of things. I think you have to have that dialogue that says that's going to be more important. It doesn't completely supplant the need to continue some formal education, but you have to make that shift from this is all about the learning to this is all about being well, happy, adjusted in a way that allows you to learn. So what do you do? I alluded to it a little bit earlier. Whether it's teachers, social workers, people in skills, Jersey, whatever, we have all made a tremendous effort to keep in personal contact, even if it hasn't been in direct contact like this, you know, the phone call, the Zoom call. And I think you all know that we also introduced what we've called the recovery curriculum. So we've made sure that we've worked with teachers and supported teachers to be able to deliver a different set of experiences in the classroom for children, so that in the time that they are in our care and learning, we're doing the right things with them and for them. And then we've made sure that a wider set of support, some of which has had to be expanded, as you know. I don't know, the Yes Project just around the corner from here, for example, has had more people on it and more hours. We've made sure that there's the means of children and young people and families, crucially parents and carers as well, can contact us, talk to us and just get some reassurance, whether it's information, advice, and of course, in some cases, we have given direct support where we've needed to.
Now, some people may be wondering why I'm focusing so much on health and well-being in the middle of Jersey Tech Week, but I just think that they're all one and the same. I just want to go inside the school building, Peter. People talked about the schools being closed. Actually, there were students for various reasons who were having their education. You had to keep the physical teaching going as well as the virtual teaching going. And before we got onto this new recovery curriculum, you, I guess, instinctively had to know we need to look after these kids.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the, I think one of the most important ways we can make students feel happy and comfortable is that feeling of success. And so providing them with a really strong curriculum, whether they were in school or out of school, was so important. And recognizing the efforts that they'd made. For some of our students, that was very, very difficult. You know, they did not have their own bedroom to work in and things like that. And I had two daughters as well, one who would have been taking her GCSEs that year and one who was in year 9. And I knew from both of them the pressures that they were feeling. My daughter, particularly in year 9, found it very, very difficult towards the end, not seeing her friends, not being part of that social network that is a school and the community. And so it was incredibly tough, but we worked really hard as a school to look at, you know, and really understanding how to motivate our kids during lockdown, how to, you know, provide really great ways of recognizing their efforts. And you know, so we felt very successful on the whole. I think there were, interestingly, I think there were probably about 5 to 10% of our students, maybe less than that, maybe 5%, but of students who felt very comfortable working from home, working on a computer. But I would say, you know, when those students came back and had that one-to-one contact with their teachers, it meant so much to both the teachers and our students. It was such a nice thing to be back in the classroom.
Rory, it strikes me that what Peter was saying there has kind of hit the nail on the head, that actually it's horses for courses. Any one thing will suit one set of students more than another. And actually the outcome is a blend.
Absolutely, you can't. There is no one student, you know, and that's the difficulty. Why I think you'll never replace teachers. You know, that's the whole thing. You can put learning online, but you need that interaction. But you know, I think a few of the themes that you've said here today, you know, hearing Leonie talk about problem solving and hearing about mental health and can you teach those kind of skills? Absolutely. I get kind of on a bit of an evangelical escapade here when I talk about exams. For me, exams are the problem. They take up so much time in a school to prepare students for exams when they have very little reality in life. And that's where I think the focus, not just with Jersey, although Jersey does have the ability to shape its own education to a certain extent, you can take away that time and you can teach kids resilience, you can take them out. But at the moment, a teacher's time is, you know, by the minute. If we lose 10 minutes for something or other, it's actually a real pain and we have to go back and reclaim that from somewhere else. And having seen the kids get their results given to them based on teacher assessment was very interesting. I kind of hope, controversially, that yes, exams happen in some way, shape or form in the summer, but that there is still that safety net of the teacher assessment. Maybe a teacher says, this kid's a C, but if they perform well in an exam, they could get a B, but if they really mess up, the worst they're going to get is a D. There's that safety net that I think would help the children's mental health because you're locked in a room, the pressure is intense. We've changed the focus of what makes a successful member of society to one that can deal with pressure rather than one that can work as a community. And so while I'm going off on a slight tangent and I'll bring it right the way back in there are solutions. And I think COVID has absolutely highlighted weaknesses, but also strengths. I mean, having seen the school community come together and actually having kids log in after about 3 weeks of the kind of interesting part of it, saying, I actually want to come back to school. I think that does change the dynamic. And I think the relationship has really changed in the school environment.
We're into the final 5 or 10 minutes of our conversation, which I find it really, really interesting. I want to move from now and focus on the future and how digital fits into that. Mark, I'll just come to you, picking up on a bit of what Rory said there. The education model in terms of exams and curriculum, Jersey inherits or imports off-the-shelf UK curriculum in terms of exam boards. Is there an opportunity for Jerseys to work with the UK and elsewhere to say, do you know what? 2020 was not a crisis. 2020 was possibly the biggest opportunity of our lifetime to rethink all of this. We've just been handed a gift on a plate, and arguably it would be criminal to miss that opportunity.
So I think the Education Minister would love to be able to have some influence on what the UK government, and particularly the English bit of it, determines around curriculum and exams. To be fair, and Rory's alluded to it, we have control over the curriculum. You know, there is a Jersey curriculum, and it's, you know, ministers are able to shape that. I think it's the assessment framework that we're probably focusing on here.
Sure.
I'm a realist. The minister will want to engage with her counterpart, particularly in England, as I say, but we'll see how that goes. I think the much more significant opportunity here is we have seen how people can be more agile, more flexible, how they can do things more quickly. I think that's the premium that we need to kind of capitalise on. And I think we also need to be clear, because this conversation is going exactly where I hoped it would in many ways, which is what are the conditions we need to create for learning to flourish? That's the first point. And the second one is what are the characteristics that young people themselves, as well as employees of the future, want them to have. And we've talked about resilience, we've talked about problem solving. These things have come back to the fore, actually. I mean, the adults have had to think about problem solving in different ways, haven't they? So why shouldn't we actually go, oh, do you know what, here's a moment where these things have come back into very sharp focus. Are we genuinely going to grasp them and do something, if not different, because I don't think you need to do things different for the sake of it, but are we going to do more of it and more quickly so that we reshape the curriculum? In other words, we reshape the learning and the teaching so that children and young people do get to experiment with how to problem solve, how to develop coping strategies when under pressure, let alone getting close to being stressed. And for me, yes, there's a kind of 10% discussion with the UK, okay, I think, but I'm realistic. I think the Education Minister will probably be realistic, but that won't stop us trying to challenge.
Aiming for 11% at all times, that's what I'd say. Come on, Mark.
and given that that's a significant percentage increase, we'll go for it. But I think, your destiny largely lies in your own hands, doesn't it? I think that's certainly a view I take. And we can make some of these things happen more quickly and to greater advantage to children and young people than has been the case recently.
Leonie, I'm going to give you a project. It's called Transforming Education in Jersey. I'm going to give you the appropriate budget, and I'm going to ask you to parachute into education and into the Digital Jersey Academy and into all the schools. What's the first thing you do?
First thing I do is make a plan with Mark, probably. Yeah, I think one of the first things I think you would do with something like that is think about what's the end game. So what are you trying to get out of it? What does success look like across a variety of different criteria, I guess. So what are we trying to change? What are we trying to improve as such? And I think we've talked a little bit about it, but I think talking about it is one thing, doing it is quite another thing. You have to get some sort of hard and fast deliverables down, and you have to get the commitment to deliver it.
And it sounds obvious when you say that, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve? But I've seen so many examples of where people run headfirst into the moment, particularly at a time of crisis, and don't think about where we want to get to. So we can do this.
Of course. Anything can be achieved.
Yeah, I would actually, kind of just jump in and say that there is an opportunity, because in the UK, everyone knows that the computing curriculum has failed in all essence. It was the right intention, but just the wrong delivery. And that is somewhere where I think, Jersey is, we're talking with Skills Jersey and doing those kind of pieces of work based on a piece Geek Talent did for us recently about what is Jersey's needs for those digital kind of skills, and we can actually run those together. And I think we are looking to be quite creative in that space, because every time I talk to industry, they want to see what people have done, not what's a B. It's not even a B anymore. It's a 6, it's a 7. I literally don't know what that means. And that's what we're hearing from employers about those skills, but how do you show them? And I think there is an opportunity with particularly the IT curriculum to actually go in there and say, let's make stuff, let's do things, let's actually find a problem, let's fix that problem and see what the kids are able to offer, because they will give us some quite interesting solutions before we take that creativity away from them and drill them in until they're 16. So let's listen to them.
Who knew asking customers would be a good idea? Who'd have thunk it? Peter, paint me a picture. There we are at the fabulous Le Quennevais school. You've got your new toys, you've got your new gizmos, you've got the smell of fresh paint in the air. But actually, that's just a building. It's the teaching staff, it's the pupils. What does the future look like? What does teaching look like? And what does your digital future look like?
I definitely think there's an opportunity for a blended response in the future. I mean, one of the things that we really did learn was you could make really precise, great explanations. For example, for history, I was watching one of our history teachers give this beautiful explanation and annotating it, and what a great resource then for their classes. But also, it just reminds you, actually, by using technology, you can record these things, you can save it, you can distribute it to specific students to really make sure that it's going to the right places. So it gives you more of an opportunity to direct the learning at the right places, which I think is a really powerful thing. But I would also say there's, in terms of one thing I have learned is there's nothing more powerful than a teacher and a classroom with students in it. Being able to see the child's faces when you're talking to them, understanding, is there a glazed expression on their face, or are they really intent? You know when you've lost them straight away and you can do something about it. Doing that online is a totally different way of working. So yeah, there's a part to play for both. Just on the point of exams, I would say at this point, GCSEs are the most equitable way of analysing a student's understanding and performance. We have to be really careful here that, for social mobility, there's a lot of studies out there that actually GCSEs have really helped with our, with some of our lowest students in society. So we really do need to be aware of that. But I totally take on board those points about, creativity and what have you. But there needs to be this really careful thought through, and we shouldn't jump ship from one thing to another.
No, absolutely. I think there is always a place for exams, but I think what's happened, as we've noticed possibly over the years, the number of exams, the amount of content that's being stuffed into that curriculum has just increased. And each time we're taking away another part. So absolutely, I think focus, and I've often said it myself, five subjects. We know the core. You've got your maths, you've got your English, one other that's kind of problem solving based, and then allow the students to kind of delve into that creativity. Because across the road here at the academy, I see it a lot when we give them the ability to choose their own projects. I've got students now in their second year of a 2-year degree course that are actually now saying, my project is my business. And we don't often get that in the traditional kind of degree method or the exam situation, where the student's empowered to think, no, I don't want you to think about what your grade's going to be. I want you to think about what your career is going to be, what those opportunities, that entrepreneurship. And that's a change of mindset that lured me here to Digital Jersey. And it's been exciting to see in our young people.
Peter and Rory, you've just given me your final thoughts without even realising it's about the future. I'm going to give you each just 10 seconds, Mark and Leonie. That is tough. Mark, the big takeaway of the past 6 months.
We can do anything.
We can do anything. 4 words, I like it. And it only took 2 seconds. And Leonie?
Learn to embrace change.
We're into 4-word moniker mode. It makes my life a lot easier. Listen to the 4 of you. Truly interesting, truly fascinating. And also, I feel quite encouraged about what the future holds for this island when it comes to education and skills in all their forms. Well, there we are. Another panel, another lot of learning done. This is Jersey Tech Week. And this morning, we're focusing on the island's response to COVID-19. We've heard about government working with private industry. We've heard about education and skills. And next this morning, we're going to talk about telecoms and infrastructure.
All the way that all different companies and government agencies and so on work together. It's easy to get everyone in the same room at the same time.
One of the things that we've worked hard on is really investing behind new infrastructure over the last 10 years. We've invested around £200 million. This is really all about enabling a smart island of the future.
Hearing about the infrastructure we've got, whether that's about AI in finance, whether that's about new things for 5G, whether that's digital health applications, they can really see Jersey as a great place to test and learn.
But the rate of failure in innovation projects is really high. And what Digital Jersey has done is they have built a kind of an ecosystem, a framework to help people with the risks. And that could be the advisors they've got, it's the hub itself, and it's the Digital Academy, which is now running and providing training courses.
There's so much work that needs to be done to unlock a whole load of opportunities in Jersey. And I hope by doing that we will help inspire a low carbon future for Jersey.
There we are. We keep learning, don't we, as we go here on Jersey Tech Week, where we're focusing on Jersey's response to COVID-19. Now, one of the recurring themes for me all the way through this, whatever we've been talking about as far as the needs of the island in the past 6 to 9 months, has been that it's all been about technology. At the start of this, I'll be honest with you, I had never made a Zoom call. I knew my Skype, but I've now got Zoom. I've learned about Microsoft Teams as well. And it's all about infrastructure and perhaps something we take for granted, and that is our telecoms companies. We have 3 panelists here, somebody physical and 2 virtual guests as well. We'll work left to right, actually, to introduce yourselves. Good morning.
Hi, Gary. Graeme Miller, and not hologram, but here physically, as you say.
I'm delighted to hear it. Next to you, another Graeme. Over to you.
Yeah, Graeme Hughes, the Chief Executive here in Jersey. I'm actually in Hampshire today.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. And Sid?
Very good morning to everyone. My name is Sid, CEO at Airtel-Vodafone, and I'm connected here digitally. And things can be done digitally. It's the digital world.
Absolutely, and I think that's for me is one of the joys of Jersey Tech Week. Is we've been connecting. Yesterday we were all over the planet bringing guests to here, and today, regardless of where you guys are in the world, there is no escape, there is no excuse, because we have the connectivity to speak to you all. Graeme Miller here in the hub this morning. Let's start off from JT's perspective as the legacy provider in the island. I'm guessing you've never had a challenge like this.
Well, I think that although we are the provider who's been here for 120 years, I think legacy carries with it connotations that are quite negative. And I think that actually JT has been very thoughtful and predictive of the future. And you know what? If back in 2010, when you'll probably remember, lots of people were sort of saying we were mad at putting the fibre in. And one of the challenges I was being given at the time was, well, what will this be used for? If I'd said, oh, well, we're preparing for a pandemic and within 3 days, everyone on the island is going to start working from home, educating themselves at home, entertaining themselves at home, and we need to be ready for that, folks would have probably stuck me on the first boat off of here. And in actual fact, I'm pleased to say, because of the investments we've made over the last decade, because of the fibre connectivity, I think that most people would agree that Jersey has had the resilience in terms of connectivity that has enabled basically businesses and schools and so on to function relatively well amid this really awful pandemic that we're suffering.
Particularly for viewers watching us from elsewhere around the world, Graeme, I just want to stay with you for a moment. I actually did not use legacy with any baggage attached to that word at all, because it constantly blows my mind, the level of connectivity in this island. I recently left the island for a couple of weeks, and it's only then you realise what you take for granted at home, because I was sitting in a hotel room and the Wi-Fi was naff. I used the 4G and it was crawling a bit for some reason compared to what I'm used to back home. And then I got back here and everything just seems to work by magic. As a non-telecoms person, it's all by magic. But just explain to our worldwide audience exactly what we have, because we are talking the most connected and among the fastest on the planet.
Yeah. So it's a great question. So 9x5 island, there are multiple operators here, ourselves and my colleagues. On the mobile side, there are 3 very good 4G networks, and that competition means that the 4G service from us all is good. And then on the fixed side, JT took the decision 10 years ago to haul out all of the copper and replace it with fibre. And I think we're the only place in the world now that is 100% glass and light. We've got rid of all the copper and electrons from the network. And what that meant was that, for example, when the pandemic hit, our standard service offering for a domestic customer was about a 0.5 gig download speed and about 50 meg upload speed. And we actually gave everyone on the island overnight a 1 gig synchronous service into their home or office. And yeah, I think in the last global speed ratings, Jersey was number 2 worldwide for broadband speed, and hopefully we'll be first the next time the results come out.
That was going to be my follow-up question. I was going to say, come on, you've got to get it to number 1. Let's speak to our other Graeme here, Graeme Hughes from Sure. At the start of this pandemic, from a business perspective, there you are running a business as you know it, and perhaps people in their offices and their call centres and doing what they do. Suddenly, you had to do this very differently, Graeme.
Yes, so recognising that we were in a tremendous starting point, and that sort of incorporated everything from our submarine cable capacity, the ability for us to carry the additional traffic that we knew our networks would be carrying, together with the on-island infrastructure. I think we were incredibly well placed and prepared, and I know all of the businesses, telecoms, but also non-telecoms companies, had some pretty well advanced plans. We didn't clearly foresee what was coming, but in our sort of business continuity planning, most of what we had done helped us, getting a really good start to make sure that the industry, finance industry, specifically, was well placed to be able to continue to operate, albeit in a new way.
And what are the pressures at that point? You can have all the business continuity plans under the sun, but when reality hits, it's always a shade different. And there are lots of intangibles, perhaps your customers responding to you in a different way than they would have done previously.
Yeah, well, I'll share now. At the start of the pandemic lockdown, the end of March, we actually had a cable. One of our submarine cables was down. We'd had ship cut the cable So we were running on just 3 of our 4 cables. So whilst we weren't complacent, we were concerned that the unknown additional capacity could cause a problem. But as I say, we worked through that, and I think it's a credit to the way that we all work together. Graeme mentioned the initiative to upspeed the broadband to accommodate the specific home working requirements, and that was done largely within a couple of phone calls, a few emails, and the decision taken by all of us just to get it done.
Now, Sid, you three, as in businesses, I won't project individual personalities onto this, but you three are notoriously competitive in a competitive market, and we'd want nothing less because that's what we want out of competition. How did you adapt to working perhaps in a slightly more collaborative way than usual when all this hit?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because when this pandemic was unfolding, day by day, week by week, things were changing, and we had to adapt very quickly to this changing scenario. But I must say that all 3 of us came together. We were in regular touch with each other. We had WhatsApp groups formed. We were keeping each other informed what initiatives we are taking. There were loads of discussions behind the scenes at Digital Jersey meeting in Digital Jersey meeting rooms, and we were asking each other any help we can do. And I would give a good example. We had an agreement in case, if COVID-19 strikes one of our engineering team, and if we need to loan resources to each other to attend to an emergency at some mast or a data center, we all agreed for these kind of contingency plans.
Now that reassures me. That is what I want to hear, but I would never take that for granted. Sid, was that just the attitude among you from the outset, or did that take some negotiating between the 3 of you?
No, not at all. I think we all realized what was the gravity of the situation. The need of the hour was to react with utmost sensitivity. And I think across the government, all the telcos, everyone really cooperated with each other. And in fact, we all were brainstorming and coming up with ideas where we can support each other.
Graeme Miller, at the outset of this, when you're having these conversations, what was the biggest problem you were trying to solve at that point?
Well, I think Graeme Hughes referred to this. There's just the unknown. No one's written this book before, no one's got the play script, and so none of us knew what was going to happen to demand. We had sort of, I think, 2 problems that were unknown. One was what would happen to demand and how would our networks kind of react to that? Because clearly the networks are configured to work in a certain way with demand during the day in offices and at night at home and so on and so forth. So there was a kind of big question mark over that. And then again, as Sid referred to, that there was actually a big question mark over the health of our employees. Sid talked about the engineering teams going out to the masts. In JT's case, we had engineers that had to go into people's homes. We needed to supply them with PPE. We had situations where we were worried that maybe we would have people very ill at home with COVID, and we might need to go out and fix a technical problem in their home, and how are we going to do that in a way that was safe for them and safe for our employees. So there was just an awful lot of kind of unknowns, and I fully agree with what both Graeme and Sid have said, that there was a sort of pleasing amount of cooperation between us because we didn't know what was going to hit us, but we all understood collectively that collectively we run this critical national infrastructure, which at this time has never been more critical, and we knew that our kind of primary responsibility to the islanders was to keep it going.
I think what really interests me is the changing shape. If we plot a curve of demand in a day, how that's changed. I'll ask all 3 of you, but Graeme Miller, to start with you. I think of my normal working day, which is mainly spent on my phone on Twitter. It's how I spend most of my life because I have no life. But suddenly I'm communicating with my colleagues back in the newsroom and doing my interviews for the television news from home using video at all times of morning, noon and night. That must throw that pattern, if it was to sit as a picture on your wall, into absolute flux.
Yeah, it does. I mean, And by the way, it's still in flux. I was looking at some graphs just yesterday, and there's still lots of perturbations and sort of movements. But you know, I think that sort of two things, if I raise them, are probably fairly obvious. First of all, everyone was at home. And that meant that there was a lot more kind of bandwidth during the day going home versus into people's offices. But what was lucky for us was that the peak demand at home, which usually is about 10 o'clock at night in terms of bandwidth, it never really got above that. So we ended up with a much more flat day. You know, it would start getting busy at 8 or 9 in the morning and it would stay busy all day. And the way I characterized it at the time was it looked like Christmas Day. So every day was Christmas Day, but the network could cope with Christmas Day, so we were okay. I think the other thing that we saw was a huge migration onto mobile voice minutes. So people stopped using, fairly obviously, their desk phones at home, and largely that got substituted by typically work mobile phones that they were using at home. And that was probably the thing that was more difficult for us to deal with. You know, because of the fibre, we had an awful lot of capacity in the fixed network, and we could deal with the geographic switch. You know, seeing, I mean, in March, I think we got double the number of normal mobile minutes that we'd ever seen before.
Wow.
At home, and that was quite challenging for kind of the network to deal with.
To steal another of your collective rivals, it's good to talk, and we found that out earlier this year. Yeah. Let's speak to our other Graeme Hughes here. Let's just take on that theme. Suddenly, that demand on mobile voice. How do you respond? And indeed, what's that like in the moment where you're thinking we might not have the capacity?
Well, it was interesting because we've spent the last 3 or 4 years seeing our traditional voice traffic, that's both fixed and mobile, but specifically mobile, move to over-the-top services, so your WhatsApp, your FaceTime, etc. And so, as Graeme has alluded to, instantly to see the traffic, and we were very similar, at 2 times mobile uptake in voice, and a similar in fixed as well. And you know, to be honest, most of us have sort of written off fixed voice, but you know, that just shows you how people revert to what is very basic technology to continue going. Yeah, the scaling of the networks is a fine art, but again, it's through the flexibility of the networks that we were able very quickly to scale up to support the voice. And we are seeing still a higher proportion of traditional voice calls. Again, that's both fixed and mobile, and I guess that's going to continue during the still uncertainty around the return to the office of quite a few of our larger businesses here in Jersey.
And Sid, talk to me about that. I mean, each of you will have a slightly different profile of what your customer base is made up of. But as work as we know it is changing and continues to change, and perhaps it's drifting back to the workplace, and who knows what the next few months will bring, maybe it drifts back to home again. How are you trying to read the road ahead and keep the show on the road?
Yeah, that's a good point. As we know, this pandemic has disrupted economies, businesses, the way of life. And as a result, we can see that people are changing. People are adapting to this new normal. And my view is that this new normal is going to stay here. You have many examples where worldwide many companies have taken a decision that they will have a mix of work from home. And in fact, there are organizations who have completely decided that they will do work from home only. So I think it's here to stay. I completely agree with my colleagues, both Graeme and Graeme, both colleagues from Sure and JT. We saw similar trends on our network where we saw a massive increase in our data traffic, almost by 50 to 60%. The peaks which Graeme was referring to in evening ones, we saw them during the daytime. And that just shows that Ireland has got massive amounts of capacities. And I think this is something we really need to be proud of, all the people of the island, that what a world-class infrastructure we have. As you could see that in many jurisdictions, people struggle with good data speeds, with lack of good connectivity solutions. Over here, Channel Island, it wasn't an issue at all, whether it was data or voice. And if I may say this, against this backdrop, telecoms and digital technology proved to be the bedrock of this. And I would say telecom is not the oil anymore, it's the oxygen. You can't imagine digital sector without telecom.
Absolutely. I think we've learned that among many other things over this past few months. And again, I come back to something I just take for granted. I always use the magic word, it just happens by magic. And there are various points this year where I was stopped in my tracks thinking, hang on a minute. There are 3 huge teams behind 3 huge telcos keeping this running, and I should never take that for granted in future. We've spoken a lot about the technology in all of this and how you as businesses responded at the outset. Graeme Miller, let's talk about the end user, the customers in all of this. The needs of customers have changed, but also in amongst all of this, there are perhaps some digitally unsavvy customers who needed to get more digital very quickly. You also had a job there at effectively a social level, helping people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Gary. It's quite interesting, and I think you mentioned it actually at the beginning that you know at the beginning of this you hadn't made a Zoom call. Yeah. I hadn't either, and you know, but I think all of us have had, to a certain degree, to kind of get used to digital technology. And yes, you're right. We've had a lot of conversations with customers. And by the way, in the early days, it was very difficult. You know, the shop was closed and so on. And we had particularly elderly customers who suddenly had to do things online that they'd never had to do. I mean, what we found was that actually, and again, this is probably not surprising on the island, that the island is full of volunteers and folks that were struggling usually had a friend or maybe a family member or what have you who could help them get that iPad hitched up, get themselves kind of connected digitally. And if we jump forward to today, I think there has been a huge revolution in the island over the last 6 months, and if I can use maybe one example if we have the time, which is the government's sort of £100 prepaid card. You know, I got mine and I went through and I registered for it. And, you know, I think the government's done a great job. It's a great initiative. It's got people back out onto the streets. But do you know what? The registration process was not trivial and kind of not easy to go through. Now, I have not read a single comment from anyone on the island saying, I am not digitally competent enough to work out how to get my £300. In actual fact, most people have succeeded in connecting. And I think if we'd done the same exercise 6 months ago, lots of people would have thrown their hands up in horror and said, this is sort of just too complicated. So I think across all ages and demographics, we've probably had sort of 6 years worth of progress in terms of digital skills in the last 6 months. And it's amazing sort of, what is it they say about necessity is the mother of all invention.
Absolutely, and it has been necessity, and we've made that leap, as you say. It feels like generational shift in the space of a few weeks at times. Let's speak to our other Graeme here as we work down the panel. Have you noticed that in any way? The not necessarily the profile, but the expertise and the needs of your customers, and perhaps where you'd assume that older customer just needs their landline. Actually, their expectations are changing the whole while.
Yeah, I think I've even seen it in my own father, who's 95. He's now using an iPad, where he wasn't before, and that was because we did everything for him. But obviously, in the early days, we had an element of safeguarding, and I've seen that across the spectrum, especially the young people. We were talking before about education, how they have helped tremendously in ensuring that both through their own endeavours, but also the voluntary sectors, that those that were less able and did not have the ability in the early days, and that's not just a skills issue, that was about providing laptops and internet access to some of those homeschoolers that didn't have internet access at home. And again, all testimony that all 3 telcos worked there together to make sure that their customers who without internet access had internet access for homeschooling. So it's been a great, and of course that's a legacy that we carry on.
Sid, what about yourself in all of this? Where can you capitalise on this with this, I guess, wider interest from your customer base in this technology? It strikes me, I know it sounds cynical to say, but there is also a commercial opportunity here for you guys.
Absolutely, but it wasn't, this pandemic also was an opportunity to strike an emotional chord with the customers. And it was not to be seen as, like a commercial organization and we are here to make money or revenue. Pretty much we did what exactly both my colleagues said. In addition to that, to ease the burden on customers and to help them in these scenarios, we collectively also, the entire industry looked at payment deferments for the customers who were facing difficulties. There were a lot of small, medium enterprises who were out of business. We helped them. In fact, we also took initiative. We recruited a couple of people from hospitality sector where we had positions open in our frontline teams. Apart from that, there were a lot of islanders who were struck off the island, either if they were attending to some medical emergency in hospital or they were traveling. We looked at reducing their bills or writing off their roaming usage. So, there were loads of these kind of initiatives which we took collectively to help out the people. And sometimes it's not just about the commercial thing, as I said. It was a pandemic and we had to, show it to our customers that, look, we all are together in this.
The thing I like is no matter how big your companies are, there still seems to be that healthy injection of human as every step of the way, which is needed. Listen, we're into the final few minutes of our conversation. I could chat to you three all day. I absolutely love this stuff. I want to get to the future. Graeme Miller, from here on in, we have our fibre connection. We have 4G in place, multiple networks. We have trials of 5G. What's next for your industry? Where do we go from here? How do you capitalise on 2020 and deliver the next big thing?
Well, I think from a JT point of view, and you said it earlier on, Gary, it's not about technology. I think for us, the challenge over the next 10 years is actually one of sustainability. We think that the digital capability and the connectivity that we put in place is going to have a massively positive impact on helping the island achieve its sort of zero carbon by 2030 goals. And I'll give you sort of one example of that. If you look at what's happened in office environments where many services have been sort of put into the cloud, I think over the next decade, the same sort of thing will happen at home. Let's use an example of, say, Sky TV. Jersey has the highest penetration of Sky TV in the UK. We've got 3 out of every 4 households is a Sky box. That's about 30,000 of them. There is nothing today that stops us having a single rack in a data center, and with the gigabit connections we have got, connecting up to the smart TVs on the island and eliminating 30,000 boxes that are currently on 24/7, burning all that power. And the next time there's a box upgrade, 30,000 have to be put into landfill and 30,000 have to be made in Taiwan and shipped over to Jersey. We can get rid of all that stuff with massive environmental positive impact. You can see today the positive impact of the fact we're not traveling and we're using video calls, and 2 of my colleagues are here on the video today. So I think, from a JT point of view, we've got a massive sustainability agenda over the next decade, which is about using the power of the connectivity we've got to help play our part in solving the kind of climate emergency that we're facing.
Graeme Hughes, final thought from you on the big next thing for sure.
Well, for us, it's a combination. It's about future-proofing, making sure that the lessons that we've learned over the last 6 months stand us in good stead going forward. And that's not just a technology play. It's about skill sets and making sure that we're all there to support each other.
And Sid?
My view is that, as my colleague said, that we need to, look at sustaining, and we should look at while, we can gloat and we can be proud of the fact that we have a great infrastructure over here, but still it's not over. As I said, work work from home, learning from home, these are new normals and they are here to stay. So we need to make sure that resilience, the enough capacities which we have built, we continue to invest in that. But if I may also use this opportunity just to highlight 2 points. At times, there is a lot of resistance from people when, telecommunications put out applications for MAST or investment into newer technologies. Perhaps this pandemic and what has unfolded in last 6 months and how this telecom sector provided the oxygen to the very much needed response which was required. I think people should take proud and support these kind of initiatives. Let's accept the fact it's a small island where there are 3 telcos. The return on cost of capital will always be a challenge. So I think everybody needs to take an immense pride in this infrastructure. And one key learning for us as a business is most of our masts are on microwave transmission. Perhaps we are working with the government and also industry to look at put up the entire infrastructure with the fiber solutions so that there is no compromise on the customer experience.
Well, there we are. I had a bunch of nodding along the way there. Some absolutely fascinating thoughts. Graeme and Sid, thank you so much for joining us today. And as I say, at no point should we take any of this for granted, that the magic source that keeps everything else running, and wherever you are watching, and whether here in Jersey or elsewhere in the world, we should be pretty proud of this.
Really, what we've built on the island is what I think everyone will have in 10 or 15 years' time, but we have it today.
Speed broadband everywhere, there's cellular coverage everywhere, everyone's got smartphones. So the technical infrastructure is right for that sort of thing.
Technology requires innovation, and innovation means you build, and therefore if you build you need to have the support infrastructure behind it. So if we build the innovation today, can we support it tomorrow?
That was really good to see. I feel like I'm just taking a couple of minutes out to reflect on what we've done so far this morning, and I will shamelessly do that because sometimes it can be like a rat race and we don't get a chance to reflect on what we're seeing and hearing. And particularly during the course of Jersey Tech Week, please do look back on the sessions once the week is over. I know across all our social media channels over the next few weeks, and if you aren't already, please do follow Digital Jersey on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and particularly on LinkedIn. Obviously great for building that professional network, but for getting some bite-sized chunks over the next few weeks of the highlights, because there is so much, it's hard to stay on top of it all. But today particularly, if you've just switched on, welcome first of all. It's lovely to have you here. My name's Gary Burgess, and this morning's session is all about Jersey's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And interestingly, as much as we've been looking across different sectors this morning, of course the common theme is technology, because we are here in the middle of Jersey Tech Week, but that is literally the case. We've just been hearing from our telecoms providers and how they've kept the show on the road, and the changing nature of the needs of their customer base as we've been perhaps working from home more, and certainly using a lot more video as well. At the start of the day, we heard from government and private industry working together on their contact tracing regime, and we also spoke to representatives of the education community to hear about upskilling and also the ways that teachers and pupils have been working differently as well. So let's talk a little bit more about industry now and speak to 4 industry representatives to find out how their businesses have changed in recent months and also how they've responded to the changing needs of their customers as well. I'm going to get them to do the hard work because I've just had the hard challenge of walking halfway across a room. It's a tough gig, isn't it? We'll go left to right. If you could introduce yourselves, who you are, where you're from, and then our audience know.
Hi, Gary. My name's John Crouch. I'm Director of Technology and Change for RBSI.
I'm Dave Edwards, and I founded Fetch.je at the beginning of lockdown, which was a completely new business to help local businesses get online quickly.
Hi, Gary. Andy Jarrett from C5 Alliance, who are owned by BDO.
Hi, Gary. Andy Delaney, Chief Exec at TSG.
I'm loving the whole hi Gary thing. It's like Steve Wright in the afternoon on Radio 2. If you're watching elsewhere, you'll have to Google that one. Right, let's start at the start with each of your businesses. We've so much to talk about on this. John, from your perspective, there we are at RBSI, and suddenly how you do what you do changes overnight. I imagine the needs of your customers change overnight, but fundamentally keeping your employees safe becomes your top priority overnight. What did you do? Take me back to that moment, if it doesn't bring back too many nightmares.
So we worked very hard, I think, is the short version of that.
I thought you might say that.
So I think really 3 phases that we were looking at this. So absolutely, you're right. The first and foremost priority was keeping our customers safe and keeping our employees safe. So first phase that we looked at was, let's move our employees home in a safe manner, provision them with hardware, provision them with the ability in a true working environment. And we did that really rapidly over a very short space of time. Over the space of around 2 weeks, we moved from around 5 to 10% working from home population to a 95% working from home population. Did that safely. That's phase 1. Second phase then is a number of or changing our working practices. So really revolutionising what we had in the stack. And I think a number of your speakers yesterday alluded to doing 3 years work in 3 months within that period. That was entirely consistent. So a whole load of business processes that were more manual suddenly got replaced with automated tools in a very short space of time. And then really the third wave of that, or the third phase of that, is really around thinking about actually going forward now, because COVID doesn't end. We're still in the midst of that to a certain extent. And what we're trying to do now is to think very closely about our purpose and the support that we give to our customers and colleagues out into society. And I think that's a key theme for us now, which is really about driving almost societal resilience. We've heard a lot of the themes about it's not going back in the box. There's almost a generational change now, whereas people that may be more resistant, and even just in the last speaker, people that may have been more resistant in the past around using these digital tools, they're now coming back and saying, provide the digital tools and away we go. And RBSI is really well positioned in terms of doing that. We're looking at 100% digital services over the coming months on this piece. So it's really about being able to support society as it goes through that wider digital transformation.
I have 1,000 questions for you just on that, but I want to work my way fairly through the panel. So I'm going to come back there. There's so many things I want to know about what you've achieved. Dave, from your point of view, you effectively, at the start of a pandemic, invented something and hoped to God it worked.
Yeah, kind of. I'm a little bit. I'm sitting next to John. He's come here with diagrams, and I feel a bit ill-equipped now.
Not at all. You've got a grey jumper. Don't worry about it. They haven't got that.
Thank you very much, Gary. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it wasn't as grandiose as inventing something. I think Fetch was really born out of pivoting an existing technology platform that was already in place in Jersey. Global business called 365 Tickets, who had been trading phenomenally well for a couple of decades, actually, powering a lot of big tourist attractions around the world, their ticket sales. Unfortunately, they got hit exceptionally hard at the beginning of February because they had China as a market. So they were really seeing it far more early than the rest of most European companies. So instead of inventing, I really spoke to the guys at 365 Tickets. I had the idea for Fetch a couple of years ago and wanted to transform this now as an opportunity to take what they had as a platform to build something very quickly, get it into market, and within 5 days of initial conversation with them, we had Fetch.je up and running.
And just the quick one-sentence elevator pitch, what is Fetch.je for those who don't know?
Fetch.je is a hyperlocal marketplace for small and medium businesses.
And effectively, what you're doing right there is where there are businesses who would rock up at 8:45 at 9 o'clock, open the door, turn the close sign to open, welcome their customers. Suddenly the government's saying to everybody, no, stay at home. And their businesses overnight are stuffed. Yeah. And they are not necessarily digitally savvy, or certainly it's not their top priority. You are providing that to them.
Yeah, so initially, kind of my thinking was just go out and provide e-commerce sites. There's a lot of software that you can do pretty much for free. You don't need to spend tens of thousands of pounds to get online doing e-commerce. But then they're standing on their own. in sort of this large pond of competitors, and then you need to spend recurring money on marketing. So Fetch really was a way to get these people online very quickly. No training, no need to get someone to understand the content management system and payment gateways. But the main crux of it was that it was a central place for consumers to come and congregate effectively. So you were driving traffic to these businesses that now don't have to spend a couple of £100 a month on Facebook marketing and Google Ads.
We'll talk more about that, including whether it works. That's obviously a key follow-up
Sure.
question. But for now, Andy and C5, let's start off with what C5 is, so people are really clear what the business is there to do.
Okay, so we're owned by BDO, so they're one of the largest professional services companies in the world, and we're the largest Channel Island IT solution provider. So we take that blend of global knowledge and intellect and local knowledge and understanding of clients and provide that to our clients. So it's around transformation, change, digitization, core infrastructure projects, application development.
Now, you've just set yourself up for a massive fall.
Good.
Because if your company was not prepared for this,
Yeah.
that would be a bit awkward. So
It certainly would, Gary, yeah.
how did you manage? I mean, in all seriousness, you are there to help other customers out of problems, make everything as seamless and remove the pain points and the friction. What about your own business at that point? Because as digitally prepared as you are, I don't think anybody quite realised how much we'd need to do.
I think we were fortunate insofar as we already had Teams, we already use Microsoft 365 in the cloud. So the people problem, or the technology problem, if you like, we have lots of people work on remote sites. Working from home was another day in the office for us. The issue really was the people problem. And we were talking earlier, the junior members of staff that are used to learning things via osmosis, they sat next to their team. That becomes much more difficult when you're now working from home. And also, junior members of staff perhaps don't have quite the luxury of a spare room to be able to set up on and put a whiteboard and that type of thing. So I think from a technology point, it was fine. And we focused really on helping our clients achieve what we were doing. And some of those, they may have had remote setups, Citrix, RDS, that type of thing, but it was only for a small number of users. Nobody anticipated all of them going home. So there was core infrastructure issues that we saw, a massive acceleration to cloud adoption. Those sorts of things. We had people deployed on client sites doing that. And what we're seeing now is twofold: automation coming in, and people starting to drive value through what they're doing with Teams and the digital data that's now being created there that actually wasn't before.
That's the bit that strikes me with all of this, as people are beginning to use this technology, that perhaps at the outset they understood what the technology was, but regardless of how many manuals you read, you don't quite anticipate how much it can do for you in a real world application until you use it in a real world application.
That's right. So, typically people have deployed Teams because they needed to talk to the customers and they needed to chat. But actually, it's so much more. And I think when we look back in 18 months, 2 years time, you'll see those that have really invested in pursuing that will leap ahead of their competition. So the sorts of things I mean are, within Teams, you can put wikis, you can have documents in there, you can embed apps within there, you can embed dashboards and reporting, and you can share those with your clients. Actually, if you do that within your own environment, it's under your own governance. And then if you layer chatbots and that type of thing on top of that, and you've got question and answer pairs, you create a knowledge base. And if you're doing things like video streaming through Steam, you can find that there's a question that one of your team members answered. You can point them to the contextual conversation where that question was answered. And if you've done some training, you can go 1 hour and 43 minutes into this training video, you'll find some training on that topic. These things people weren't doing a year ago, or maybe at the cutting edge they were. Now people are going, we've got these lakes of data that we didn't have before that's been enabled through that. That, I think, is going to be game changing for those companies that are investing in doing those things in these times.
Well, let's drill down on some of those thoughts. Andy, first of all, let's start off with the business. TSG, what is it?
So TSG, we're a technology-led organisation, and we're a little bit different to a number of the competitors in the market because principally what we do is focus on time. So at the heart of everything we do is really around looking at how time can be recovered, time can be reinvested, and really working with clients to identify how they can improve their processes and actually recover time into their business, which enables them to become more productive and efficient. So, for us, that's underpinned by technology. So yes, behind the scenes, there's developers, there's technologists, there's people who can deliver service delivery elements like project management. But fundamentally, when we're talking to people, really, we're trying to see how they can enrich their business and drive bottom line profitability back in by recovering time. Because, throughout the last 6 months, what I've heard is we're so busy. Everybody's busy, busy, busy. But are they being productive and are they being efficient? And that's where we come in to actually go, we can talk to you and work with you to deliver solutions to give you time back.
And how has the past few months affected that in terms of your existing clients' interests in the services you provide, or indeed new customers who would never have come to you because that time was not at the top of their list, and suddenly their workforce as they know it, I mean, it's not there in the office. Yeah. Perhaps they can't quite look over the shoulder, and as Andy said about learning by osmosis, all those things can't happen in the way they used to. How has that affected your business for good or ill?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's positive, obviously, because the reality is in day-to-day operations in a business, sometimes the business itself doesn't see the delays that are incorporated by manual process. So, once the remote workforces were put in place, people started to realize actually their processes break down. And so that's where we started to get engaged. And the last 6 months has been an incredibly productive and busy time for us, whether it's deploying a new platform for medical billing into primary care to work with the GPs and government, or whether it's to deliver an online portal for PPE, or whether it's to deliver a revised app for Solgenic. There was lots of opportunity that all of a sudden businesses found themselves going, how are we going to do this? And that's where they came to us looking for solutions.
What did you learn about your own business, though? It's very easy for you to wax lyrical about your clients and how they're the best clients because they chose you. You would say that. What have you learned about you and your team in the middle of all of this?
It's been great to reflect back, because actually at the beginning of the year, I mean, us as an organisation have gone through a transformation over the last couple of years. We're finding ourselves in new waters and new business opportunities. But actually this year itself, at the beginning of the year, we were looking to see how we as an organisation could, see how we work better. And for the first 3 months of the year, we were in that transformation phase of actually moving away from a lot of manual processes, bringing in new systems, automation to drive that principle of time saving gurus internally for us. So actually, when the pandemic hit kind of, March time, we had already gone through an element of that. And so for that transition into the remote working was just a step change, like just a people change. But actually we adapted it really well. And so having those systems in place actually resulted in us saving over 30% of our time by mid-year. So that gave us a lot more capacity to then work back with our clients.
You all just make it sound so easy. That's the one thing I'm taking away from all of this, and I'm very aware it's not. John, I want to just come back on some of the thoughts from when you were setting out your stall and the 3 phases you went through with RBSI. Fundamentally, whereas other businesses perhaps can, pull down the shutters for a day or two while they recalibrate, you do not have that choice. You have to be there in some form or another 24/7. Just talk me through the challenges of that, because it wasn't just a walk in the park. I know it wasn't. It can't have been.
No, not at all. You're absolutely right. So for banking and finance as a whole, it's a key component of, UK and Channel Islands industry. It's not an option to pull down the shutters. It's not an option then to go on kind of a furlough situation. So there was no question about that from the outset. There was that absolute kind of steely focus in terms of what do our customers need, but actually walking through that and being able to go, okay, then, so we're recognizing that our customers are going to have to go through some kind of a transition through this. So for example, the customer that may have preferred to turn up to a branch and do so kind of 2 or 3 times a day, there's an acceleration of that move away from that, whereby we were saying, look, actually now need to use the digital tools that have been provided around this, and really being able to kind of think through in terms of what support do both our customers need on that journey, and providing that educational support, but also I think some of the themes that have been picked up by my colleagues here. So actually there's a whole shift in terms of thinking needed from almost a colleague perspective. there were some themes that were already enacted, and I think it's common just talking before. There were some things that we already had in play. You know, the move to cloud, kind of, you know, much more use of collaborative tools across the industry. It's actually accelerating across that piece, but doing so, and I think for me it was shot through with that purpose around this is a real crisis for the, you know, for kind of the wider industry. It's a crisis that everyone across the world is experiencing in some format, and our responsibility then to kind of maintain those services for our customers, but do so in those kind of new mechanisms. That was paramount for us. So it's really recognising actually there's a layer of this which just says, look, here's the digital tools, but also there's an underlying layer that says, look, actually we've got a responsibility now to help society, to help people come to terms with those tools and to use them in different ways, and driven by necessity, as you've said.
I mean, driven by necessity helps for starters, doesn't it? It's like get with the game, guys. But actually, there will be customers who are perhaps suspicious of technology or not instinctively able to use technology, and quite frankly like the kiss of someone's jib, seeing them face to face, having that conversation. How do you overcome that?
It's a really interesting one, because what we've seen is some let's say thematic or cultural changes that are going on within that. So for example, if you hand people now a £5 note or a £10 note, you might get a reaction in terms of that. These things help on that, because people will be balancing all the time their own kind of health and kind of, let's say, social distancing considerations with their natural reluctance to move away from something that they've known and used for a long period of time. So I think we're absolutely on the right side of the tide in terms of doing that, and we are seeing customers. You know, there were a couple of speakers yesterday. We are seeing customers massively embracing this now and saying, well, actually, I will do this for maybe a different set of reasons. It doesn't come naturally, but now's absolutely the time to be able to do that. So we're pushing into things like, actually, do we get into cashless situations? You know, prepayment card. There's been a fantastic success here in Jersey, and so on. So I think there's a social shift that's going on, for which, gratefully, I think we're on the right side of that. And as I say, I think finance industry, you know, absolute compulsion and a responsibility to be able to help society become more resilient as a result of this. We will get through COVID, of course, but I think we'll come through as a very different society with different approaches to things, which are part of what you're alluding to there.
And Andy, you're speaking a little bit earlier about the fact that it's not necessarily the technology in all of this that's the problem. It's the ruddy people. You know, if only we could just remove these humans from the system. My word, if we could automate society, actually, in all seriousness, overlaying those soft skills onto this hardware and software, that's a big piece of work that I think isn't spoken about as much as perhaps it should be. We focus so much on the nuts and bolts of the tech.
You're right. And unfortunately, within our group, we have transformation specialists. You know, lots of wonderful technology problems fail because the people that they're delivered to don't buy into them. So on any journey, you know, you've got to take the people with you. Again, we're fortunate within our group, we've got a core of people that's their day job, that's what they do. So, you know, internally, our house was in order fairly quickly, but for our clients, that was another piece of the jigsaw puzzle that we could help address for them.
And on a very different scale, when it comes to the business users of Fetch.je, there you are with this shopping platform that just works by magic from a business perspective and just works by magic from a consumer perspective, or at least that's the theory. Actually, in reality, you will be dealing with people struggling with this on either side of that wall, in effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the issues with where you get kind of minimum viable product, which is very much what Fetch was launched as, which is kind of the full feature spec, but it's kind of not as rich a build as it could have been in terms of the full bells and whistles of automation. And we were fortunate we had the resource at 365 Tickets. You know, you guys talk about people and working with internal teams. I think probably only about 10% of 365 Tickets actually know who the hell I was. When on Monday morning they came into their office and they started getting emails about this platform called Fetch, which had launched. And it was just a case of, yeah, sorry guys, kind of a bit of a pivot of the business. But we had that resource to help businesses get onboarded. Unfortunately, you know, very much needed resource to help customers during the early stages, whilst we could kind of pick up our feet and see where we were going and start to iterate the platform and keep further improvements going along the line to kind of ease those barriers or issues that consumers and businesses on the supply side were having.
And so were you quite conscious of that actually you know what all the bells and whistles can be and what they can do, but you don't want to scare everyone off on day one?
Well, it was a case of we know what it can be, but bear in mind that it was a ticketing system.
Okay.
Say Vinifera selling a bottle of wine or what have you was coming down as a ticket. So there was a lot of stuff in the background that we knew can and would be worked out over time. And obviously we had a vision of where it really can go with the right investment. And we're sort of fortunate enough that we've secured a long-term financing and projects and plan for going forward for Fetch. So if anything, it's only going to get better now, and we can start to take stock of what we were kind of sprinting with, and now start to strip it back and go, right, this is now what it needs to be rebuilt up as, working in parallel whilst it's still currently live.
Go on, give us the scoop. What will Fetch be this time next year?
Fetch will be Fetch, but it will be it will have every bell and whistle in there that we knew that we'd wanted and we've spoken to suppliers about. And also we are going to be investing heavily into marketing over the Christmas period. So basically, better drive traffic to local businesses that are on the platform, and it's staying free till the end of December.
Fetch.je, the official local online platform of Father Christmas, that kind of thing. You can have that.
Gary, thank you.
Andy, one of the greatest gifts that actually we wish Father Christmas could give us, but he doesn't. The greatest gift, because you can never get it back, is time. Are people realizing that, as you're speaking to your clients, are they still just in crisis mode of like, oh, for goodness sake, let's just get through the day in one piece? Or have we now reached the point where some of your clients are able to draw breath and go, do you know what? What we've learned over the past few months is if we act a little bit smarter, if we do this a little bit more differently, actually, that 8-hour working day that Bob did over there and Sheila did over there, actually, it's only 5 hours, thus freeing up 3 hours. Have we actually got to that point yet in your experience?
Yes, I think that there's two parts to that. I think from a corporate perspective, I think there's certainly waking up to that. From a personal perspective, I think that individuals are starting to realise that their day has changed. Over here, our commutes are relatively small, but in the UK, people are all of a sudden now saving, hour, 2 hour, 3 hour day from commutes, and all the other activities that go around, to support that. So, and on the island, we're seeing that as well. So actually, people are, themselves becoming much more aware of their own time and how they use their time and how they can become more productive. And so the other thing that we're seeing is that the businesses are starting to wake up to realise that now we've got a workforce at home. We've gone through a period where some workforce has gone back to home, but now they've gone back to the office, and now they're probably going to end up going back to home over winter. There was a question around actually, well, how do we get files? How do we get documents? How do we get that physical bits to people? And so that was one of the areas that we worked on around, again, this time principle was that it would take so long to get physical documents from person to from office to somebody working from home. And so that's where we worked with G4S to launch a new service around the COVID scan on demand. So this is really around being able to take physical documents that are either in a store somewhere or in a corporate office, and be able to take those documents, scan them and present them back to the person remotely without having to wait an elapsed time for documents to come, and also to de-risk the whole governance piece around where are files. They get lost. So so that's something we bought, and again, that's a real time driver and to try and drive that efficiency and productivity.
Let's talk about new products and services in this. Andy, from your perspective, you may be working with existing tools that you're helping your clients understand, but I suspect some of them are completely new to your clients, or their use is new. What is new that you've been delivering in these recent weeks and months?
There's a couple of things that spring immediately to mind. The most public one, I guess, is working with government and Microsoft to deliver the app that you will know that's protecting our borders. So as people come into the island, the whole COVID testing, tracing, we've been working on that. So that's helping balance the safety of the community with enabling people to come into the island. So that's probably the most high profile one. We also worked on an EU initiative which allowed people to track their or plan their day so that they could go to where they wanted to go to, but avoid the sort of peak hotspots. So obviously applicable to COVID, but also other uses as well. So I'd say those two that were new or are new products.
You just sort of threw those away in passing, but let's just dwell on what you built there and what is in use in terms of that COVID application. It is fundamental to the actual physical operation of this island right now.
Yeah. It's built upon Microsoft Power Apps. It's quite a cutting edge application. It's been delivered, as I say, in conjunction with Microsoft. Their team. It's been used an agile methodology to deliver it because it needed to be done, very quickly. And it's been a team effort. There's been a number of people on the island all working on it. Not just us, and the government of Jersey team as well. It's been a great success. And I think, going back to the people, and I did put a comment on LinkedIn about this. My mum, bless her, 76 years old, came to the island, and she had more fun in that queue waiting to be tested than I think, and the people made us so, welcome and happy. Yeah. And not at technology. It was about, the chatting my mum up, bless her, and them giving her water because it was a hot day and what have you. And she really enjoyed that experience. So again, people, transformation and technology coming together.
A recurring theme in all of this, absolutely. My experience of coming through the borders a number of times at the airport and through the harbour most recently as well was exactly that. As much as we know this is a massively clever bit of technology, the human end, you still want to feel very sympathetic and someone who understands you might be a little bit nervous or apprehensive, and it just seems in the majority to be working well. What about from a banking perspective, John? What's new, and how much of that is within your control and how much gets sort of fed further down the food chain of RBSI? How does that work?
So a couple of answers to that one. Just building on Andy's points around that piece about the human elements of this. I think reflecting back on the last kind of 6 months where in the initial lockdown, we did have pressure in terms of closing down branches. We actually repositioned our branch staff really quickly and became almost telephony staff that were doing proactive calls then to customers. And they weren't doing proactive calls to customers on the basis of, how's your bank account? What products do you need right now? They were doing those proactive calls based on kind of customer, needs, and being able to say, look, actually, are you in a situation? Are you in a vulnerable situation? Are you seeing anything? Do you need any help around these things? Just being able to signpost some of the great resources that we've got on island. So I think that human element becomes more important, almost irrespective of which business you're in. I think your question there around how much of this comes down from the food chain from a NatWest group and almost a UK perspective. We're very privileged in terms of RBSI. We run our own estate, I would say. So we're in the best of both worlds. We're able to draw materials from NatWest Group where appropriate and draw services from NatWest Group. And at the same time, we're able to kind of manage our own estate and manage our own inventory. So with the place that we're at the moment, we're embarked upon a digitisation journey. We're working very hard with our customers then to be able to say, look, 100% of our services should be available digitally. It doesn't mean that the only place you can get them is online. It means that actually back to that kind of customer experience in a post-COVID environment, you'll have more choices. And our sense is that actually more people will lean towards that digital that would have been more reluctant previously. We're looking at things like Cora, which is a digital assistant, an online kind of AI agent that's been very successful in terms of UK. And that's an example whereby we can say NatWest Group, the power of almost the mothership in terms of this is there, and it's got services that we can draw down on, but actually we'll put that local flavour on it and make sure that it meets local demand. So there's a fair balance, I would say. And it really just gives us the best of both worlds.
Well, listen, we're into our final 10 minutes or so here. We've been getting questions through while we've been talking here. I'll work my way through them. I don't think I'll be able to get to all four of you for every question because I want to try and get through as many questions as I can. Andy, I'll start with you on this one. Have you noticed any cultural changes with your clients in their expectations of your services?
Directly in services, I think the cultural change is the requirement to deliver. So, there's a lot of pressure to get services up and running and solutions. A lot of them are time critical, given the scenarios. And that's where we found is actually there's a lot of the chaff has been removed, so it's just let's get on with business. Let's get down to what we need to do. And so, and I think that's with teams, when you're face to face, there's a lot more I don't know, maybe soft skills that are needed, but typically on Teams, it's very much a, get on the video call, let's see what we need to do, what can we do to deliver the service. So I think from a cultural perspective, there's that side of it where actually it's, much more kind of focused. from a people side, especially from internally, I think for us it's really trying to keep that culture going and working as a team. The 9 to 5 days, it got thrown out the window kind of 6 months ago.
What are they?
Yeah. So that, we've had to adapt and flex, and, you're doing that as best you can through that virtual environment. That's only going to continue. So it's finding out ways, and we're where possible, we get together, and also with our clients where we can, safely to do so. I think it's just that time criticality element, which is probably what we're most reactive to.
Andy, another interesting question here. Did you expect to see more disruptive technologies emerge during the course of this?
No, I think what we've seen is people using, as I say, Teams. So it's accelerated beyond belief. What people are realizing is the other uses and the value that can be derived from that information that people had, but it wasn't digitized and therefore couldn't be created into value.
Okay. And I love that you really did think very deeply about that one, and I appreciate that a lot. Dave, there's been a lot of digital change. Question here, and actually it's something that occurs to me a lot of the time. Do you think people will just revert to type when all this is over?
There will be an element of that, yeah, but I do think that there is a seismic shift in behaviours. And I kind of think of it as the boat's rising and the high tide's just gone up a little bit more. And sure, it will, subside a little bit, but it will still be higher than it was at, this point last year. And I think it's that gradual step change that we will keep having. And also, who knows what's going to happen with the COVID and potential restrictions as well, which may further reinforce these behaviours and compound it even more.
John, a question about how a community works together in a digital community as well. I guess from my point of view, I'm also intrigued to know how you feel Digital Jersey fits into that process as well. It strikes me this is a time where people can really collaborate and work with each other and work with Digital Jersey to bring that kind of all the ingredients of the cake together, in effect.
Absolutely. Well, you're looking for an advert for Digital Jersey there, but so I'll give you that one.
I don't know who planted that question, but there you go.
Self-made. Absolutely. So I think the role that Digital Jersey provides, I think it provides a fantastic service in terms of almost an enabler. So it's generating the conversation, it's reinforcing the conversation, it's bringing together thinking and kind of experiences such as this one and being able to share them. And in doing that, I think that's a very live part of almost that wider social conversation that says, look, what are the next steps that we need to take on this? What's right and appropriate? How do we get the most value out of this? So Digital Jersey, fantastic in terms of actually just continuing with that conversation. If I can pick up, just sorry, on the previous question there then, just around actually that will we see a change back in terms of back to a more pre-COVID way of working? I also think that there's a slightly different take that. I do agree with your answer. I think it will be a slight reversion, but not a full reversion. And I think the key driver to that is people's convenience. So once they set aside all the health concerns or being, let's say, asked to be in lockdown, it will just be more convenient to use the digital tools going forward, and they'll go, actually, why would I now want to invest time and effort in something else? So I think convenience has got a massive part to play in terms of this.
And actually, that's something I remember from I was involved in the COVID-19 challenge a few months ago. We all linked up, and again, I'll mention Digital Jersey again because they were part of it. They brought all of this together. But I remember at the time, your big pitch was convenience. That was such an important part of this process.
Yeah, I mean, it was easy to think of Fetch at the very beginning as being about sort of necessity and getting essentials, but actually for it to have any legs going forward, obviously we knew lockdown was going to come down and come away. And I think it was just actually, it was a time where behavioural change was there to bring about time saving, to be honest, as Andy was saying earlier. And yeah, it was convenience we were playing into on the longer term rather than just a necessity right there and then.
I'm going to work our way down the line. Final answer time each. I wish we had longer. It's always the way, isn't it? Andy, I'll start with you and we'll work our way right to left on this. What's your big takeaway that you want to bottle and use for the next 6 months, for the next 6 years out of the last 6 months?
Well, it comes back to actually what we stand for as time-saving gurus. It's all around time. So even when we're looking forward over the next 6 months as to what are we going to work on? What solutions are we bringing? Actually, it's really just extending that out into our client base now and saying, actually, how are they going to be working in this new environment? And we're working on a new platform to be able to pivot mobile apps. So that's something that we can work with businesses, again, really around that kind of understanding their time challenges, how they can engage better with their customers and actually drive a more convenient, efficient process for them to actually deliver that successfully.
Andy?
I think it's about being brave. So those companies that use this time to invest in their infrastructure, their people, their transformations, the M&A, whatever it is, they're going to come out of this into a new normal with insights that their competitors won't, because they've been in a hold and see pattern. What you'll see then is, roll forward 6, 12, 18 months, you'll know who's been brave, because they'll be, leaps and bounds above their competition, and there may well be some interesting outliers there. So watch out for the brave.
That's an interesting one. What about yourself, Dave?
Mine's a little bit more kind of down on humans and working ways, and I think managers and employers really need to stop playing lip service to flexible working when it actually means you still have to turn up 9 to 5. And I think managers need to better understand how to manage by deliverables, rather than just, treating people as sort of factory workers for this now new remote way of working to actually thrive. Let a mum or dad work from 8 till midnight at night because they've been, half the afternoon looking after their child or what have you. And I think managers need to better manage now for this new way of working.
And John, the Jerry Springer style final thought in 20 seconds goes to you. Q.
I'll keep it brief. 3 things. I'd like to put all the flexibility we've demonstrated as an island and as an economy, the resilience that we've demonstrated in terms of actually coming up with new solutions on this, and going forward, I think a renewed sense of purpose.
A renewed sense of purpose. I've got a renewed sense of enthusiasm from all of you today. The 4 of you, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdoms, and bravery perhaps is the key word going forward. I like a bit of bravery in my life. We've certainly had honesty from our panels this morning as we've been reflecting on Jersey's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's our morning session of Jersey Tech Week this Tuesday. Let's just take a look now to what's happening this afternoon, and we're back here from 3 until 5 o'clock this afternoon. Our theme is going to be how AI is benefiting industry. The legendary Professor Dame Wendy Hall will be leading a panel looking at AI, including focusing some of the ethics around AI from 3 o'clock this afternoon. And then we continue with I guess you could call it a more practical session, speaking with some of those practitioners of AI about how they use it now and about how they'll be using it well into the future as well. So that is all to come at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you to all my guests and panelists this morning. Thanks to you for watching as well. And I'll catch you next time for more from Jersey Tech Week.